I love my career and I feel like I'm a rock star at work. I get praise and industry recognition, and I am well known in my area of expertise. The truth is, though, my personal life is messy. I'm always late for family events, which frustrates my spouse and kids to no end. I struggle at completing the small everyday things like running errands and getting the chores done, and I feel like I never catch up. Is there a better way I should be managing my time?
Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely an author-editor situation.
See, who knew?
I know.
She thought she needed a new calendar.
No, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you at all. So author and editor is all about gaining leverage when you are leading in any kind of system. So here's what I mean by that fancy statement. Mm-hmm. So when you're a manager or director or any kind of leadership responsibility, okay, you're leading in a system. Okay, so there's complexities in that system. And there's some things that only you can be doing. And there's some things you shouldn't be doing. Think about your hourly rate, right? If you're paid a very high amount of money to do some of these complex things that only you can do, you shouldn't be doing stuff that maybe you did 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
That's not a good use of resources. Now that job is getting overpaid for because you're doing it. Okay, so you don't want to be that person. Same thing is true as a parent. Okay, when you're a parent, so let's assume in this situation, which we know this person's got kiddos. We don't know the age of the kiddos, but they've got kiddos. I think you mentioned some kiddo examples in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume they've got some kiddos. So they're a leader in that system as well. Okay, and so you need to gain leverage in that. So just like with making sure you're not doing stuff you shouldn't be doing at work, it's the same thing at home. So for example, let's say you got a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 18-year-old. If you are still making their lunch every day for school, doing all their laundry, cleaning their room, you're not gaining leverage. That's stuff that a 15-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old are quite capable of doing. And actually, if they haven't developed these skills at this point, that's a whole separate problem. Because now they're going to go off to college, and are you going to come make their lunch, clean their room? We heard stories.
We have heard stories of people who do it.
Of parents who
Please
still
don't be that person.
Who still do this. From our daughter, who has
roommates and
things where the parents come and clean the room for them. So you don't want to do that. That's not equipping that person to take ownership, initiative, and display critical thinking in life, which frankly is the whole purpose of parenting, is to grow owners and take initiative and critical thinkers. Grow authors.
That's our other podcast, though, that we need.
But that's the whole purpose of parenting. You're trying to grow fully formed adults. You're not trying to create some kind of hobbled Frankenstein mess that walks out at 23 that's you and your kid attached to the hip, and you go into work together, and whenever they have a problem, you jump in and solve it for them. That's not what you want. So for this particular individual, this is not a time management issue. It is a seat problem. They need it first at work, ask themselves, are there things that I am authoring that I shouldn't be? Odds are the case is yes. Whenever I work with anyone who's in a leadership responsibility role and they're working more than 55 or 60 hours a week, it's usually an author-editor problem.
What do you see them hanging on to that they should be giving up? What are the examples of?
Well, it's a lot of what we already talked about. They're first of all, the number one thing, most common, is the direct reports don't come with anything authored to meetings. That's number one.
So
that's probably most people listening to this that are a manager and direct report, managers and director roles or above, or VP roles. You've got directs coming to your meetings empty-handed, waiting for you to
give them a list.
Give them a list of things.
Right.
As soon as you give them a list of things, you're authoring, and that takes a lot more time. And they no longer are taking ownership, showing initiative, or displaying critical thinking, because by definition, you've just given it all to them. And so that's costing you more time, because now you have to manage and then monitor that system, because you've got worker bees rather than leaders underneath you. So that's the number one. The number one is people aren't doing that. You're not creating a culture of that, and you're not using this language of author editor. So there's lack of role clarity, which then means you tend to jump in and solve the problem. Now, I want to be clear. I want to honor everyone who's listening that says, yes, that's me. That means you're a natural author, which is a wonderful thing. But the problem with natural authors is they don't know when not to author.
Right.
They author in a 360-degree way, when you should really primarily just be authoring up, because that's your primary job. And then editing down. Set expectations, but edit down. So there's that component. And then on the other side of the coin, it's pushing and stretching your kiddos when they start to get in those tween years, 11, 12, 13, and start to give them responsibilities like clean their room, make your bed, start to learn how to do laundry. And yes, folks, when you give people author responsibilities for the first time, they're going to make mistakes.
Yep, they're going to shrink your favorite sweater.
Clothes are going to get ruined. They will, and that's okay.
Yeah. And
then pretty soon they're going to learn how to when to hang their clothes, how to dry their clothes, and then when they go off to college and beyond, they've got that under control. They make their own lunch. They do all those sorts of things.
This person also, even mentioned getting chores done. So with you're saying the kids and listing other family members, but I will throw you under the bus, or at least, I don't know, but you struggled for a long time. We have a very large yard and you loved mowing the lawn.
I did.
Loved it. And I understand, like it was just something to do, kind of zone out, get some sun, listen to your whatever, favorite podcast while you're out there. But you realized this is taking up 2 hours every week and I can be doing other things.
More. Yeah.
And so we hired a lawn service, and we still get out there every now and then and pull weeds, but at the same time, you've got 2 hours back of your life to write books.
Right. Exactly right. And I'll go even further. That'll be a good example for people who've, thinking about work roles. So in high school, I had a couple jobs, and one of my jobs was I independently mowed lawns.
Right.
So I had this old station wagon, and people come over to me while I'm mowing the lawn and say, "Will you mow my lawn?" And I had a whole book of customers.
Right.
So I mowed lawns, and then I did that. So I took pride in that. It was my job. And then in our first house, I mowed the lawn and edged the grass, and I did all that. And it was a smaller yard, and you could knock it out in about an hour. And then our yard now is not an hour kind of yard. It's a bigger yard. It's more like a field. So it takes a lot more time. 2 to 3 hours on the weekend. But I still took pride in doing that job.
I know.
Because I thought, well, I'm really good at this job and I liked doing this job.
Right. And that's it. That's a great point. You were good at it. You enjoyed it.
But it took a lot of time that I no longer had because I had other responsibilities.
That's right. You kept piling on.
And then we hired this amazing lawn service. And in 1 hour, what would take me 3 or 4 hours to do, they would do it in 1 hour, and it would look better than what I did. Mm-hmm. And I could sit inside and they typically do it on a Friday morning or afternoon, and I could sit inside of my office taking a coaching call, and the coaching call would more than pay for what that lawn service cost.
Right.
And then some. It would typically pay for almost a month of that lawn service. So it's just a better use of my time.
Right.
But that's part of the author-editor dynamic too, is knowing when to go from player to coach.
Right.
Because that's also the journey of leadership, is slowly making that shift from player to coach.
Well, I think it's a good example too of, as you go up, as you level up in your career, there are going to be things that you enjoy doing that brought you joy, but now, as you're saying, player to coach, you've moved beyond that. You have to give it up so that somebody else can do that job, because it's now their job. You have a different job.
Right.
And even though you were good at it, and even though you enjoyed it, you have to move on.
Right. And you make an important distinction in there that I want to add to. It's a job. Mm-hmm. It's not a hobby. If it was a hobby, I could do it whenever.
Right.
But the yard's a job.
Yeah, if you don't do it, we get letters.
It has to be done. Yeah, and if you don't, we live in the South. If you don't do it, let a couple weeks go, because sometimes it would happen. I would let a couple weeks go. I'd be swamped with things. Yard looks horrible. You get more weeds, and you get all these, and then it becomes this snowballs. It requires regular maintenance. It's a job that requires attention.
Right.
Someone needs to own that. It's not a hobby.
Right.
So while it's a job I liked, it's still a job. Mm-hmm. So we need to make sure that we're doing the things that only we can do. There's a real estate term, highest and best use of a piece of real estate. It's the same thing for us. What's our highest and best use in the role that we're in, whether it's a parent or whether it's a manager. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, when you hear this collision, which a lot of us feel, it's a seat issue. We're probably doing jobs that, frankly, we've outgrown.
Right.
And others should have grown into.
Right.
That we are now stunting their growth.
Right.
Whether it's a direct report or it's a 17-year-old.
Right.
We're actually holding them back, not setting them up for success. Or their future employers for success, or their future spouses for success. I mean, we're creating a whole mess if we continue to kind of co-pilot with our kiddos through life. That's not a good recipe for anybody's happiness. So it's just another way to think about the seats and how to sit in the right seats at the right time.